Hi, everybody. Hi over there on the side. My name is James Malley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Paccurate. And today I'm going to talk about why major brands are making their packaging reactive. So what does that mean? Well, hopefully by the end that'll be clear. But I think simply, if you think about the state of packaging, and when I say packaging, I'm talking about a bunch of boxes that are probably on a shelf next to a pack station in your fulfillment center. Moving from changing those maybe once a decade to changing them many times a year, and how we go about changing them, their sizes, their compositions, all those things. And I guess more importantly, the point of today is why. Why is this a trend? So if we go back into history, and I guess by history I mean mostly now, the kind of goals around how we pack boxes and pack mailers are really just about minimizing air, which makes sense, minimizing damage of our goods because returns due to damage are very expensive, and on an individual shipment level, minimizing the number of cartons in the shipment. So nothing too complicated there. That's kind of the way that we look at packing in a fulfillment setting. And the way we go about that today usually is we do our best to train packers. Common sense will take most people pretty far, but then there's extra training for SOPs. Don't put the bowling ball with the china glass, things like that. Most shippers will leverage some kind of cartonization in their WMS. Cartonization being the clunky word that's not yet in the dictionary, and liberal application of dunnage. Luckily, when we open up an e-commerce package at home, we don't have packing peanuts exploding in our face anymore, but there's still a ton of dunnage in most e-commerce shipments, so that's usually the damage reduction strategy. So my kind of point in talking here today is that looking at packing and packaging as this kind of isolated issue is not really enough anymore. And certainly some of the more innovative retailer and 3PL brands have kind of recognized that. And so the whys are kind of obvious, at least to this audience, right? There's record-setting GRIs. Fulfillment in general is just so much more expensive than it ever has been before. Customer expectations is not like the old days. Gen Z, who I will talk about fondly a little bit later on, do not suffer waste like my generation does, or baby boomers. And if you've taken any kind of time to walk around the floor today, you'll note that there's a ton of amazing innovations in picking and robotics and these AMR and goods-to-person solutions that have effectively made picking so efficient that pack-out is a kind of nightmare because all these orders get picked so quickly that the only thing you can really do is add more pack stations to keep up with the robots. So reactive, to me, it's a little bit of a loaded term, I guess. But when I think of reactive, I think of real time. Responding to something in an effective way. And so, as new innovations in material science make packaging and kind of dunnage materials more expensive, we have to get a little bit smarter about how it's deployed. We can't anymore just chuck all of the new green filler material in the box like we used to do with the packing peanuts, because one, it's expensive, but two, you're kind of not really getting your money's worth out of this new kind of green innovation. The second point, counterintuitive incentives baked into negotiated rate tables. So I'm going to hazard a guess that not many people sitting here know this. I only know this because I'm a cartonization nerd. I've literally been thinking about cartonization for most of my professional career. The way that we pack always in the warehouse is try to minimize air, but that's actually not the most cost-efficient way of packing. The most cost-efficient way of packing is looking at carrier rate tables and seeing what they're actually incentivizing. All the carriers want you to minimize the number of cartons that you're shipping and the air in those cartons, but they change which one of those things they're prioritizing depending on where you're shipping something or your service type. So that's a little bit down the rabbit hole. We'll get into that later. But if your packaging could actually be responsive to those really complicated, disparate cost incentives that you're dealing with, you stand to save a lot. And of course, customer expectations. So I already talked about the amazing, packaging materials out there. Everything from biodegradable, cold chain gel packs to just really sustainable craft-based dunnage materials. I'm sure you can find a lot of examples just walking up and down the aisles here. But as I said, usually come with a price tag. And so we can't just keep chucking it in the box and hoping for the best. Like I said, Gen Z, I love Gen Z. 25% of my generation, millennials, shop online every day. 32% of Gen Z shop online every day. Why that matters is because unlike my generation, 72% of Generation Z is willing to change their behavior, their buying behavior, if they believe a brand is wasteful. I just grumble to my wife about getting a badly packed box. They don't do that. They post it on TikTok with a lot of angry emojis, and the brands have noticed. By the way, these are all examples of bad packing that I pulled from our internal Slack channel that we call the Hall of Sadness. People just being in the bad packing business or good packing business, we get hundreds of submissions from people getting really weirdly packed boxes. My colleague is going to be talking tomorrow at the ProShip booth, pulling out some really interesting examples of bad packing if that interests anybody here. All right, so this is where things get a little weird, and I alluded to this. But packing can be much more complicated if your actual goal is to minimize cost. Usually your goal is to minimize air, which is great, because air is bad. Air causes more trucks to be used, more planes to be used that are all cubing out before they weigh out. But if your goal is to actually save money, you can actually cue off of the incentives, as I mentioned, that are baked into the carrier rate tables. So with this specific example is comparing a UPS, same shipment, UPS versus FedEx. So for UPS, their rates are actually saying, we're incentivizing 2 medium boxes and 1 small box. But for FedEx, we're incentivizing 1 large box and 1 small box. And so how could this be? And in fact, if you swap these, you're going to lose $10. So if you use the FedEx optimal pack with UPS, you're going to lose $10. And I think the reverse is like a $9 loss. And it's because while both carriers want you to minimize the number of boxes and minimize the air inside, they have different infrastructure along the way, along the journey that your package is going to take. So the shippers that are thinking about packaging in like a sophisticated way are looking at packing like this as well. And so when you get this sophisticated with packing, your packaging should follow suit. I have one more example. Even if you're a 1-carrier shop, even for a single carrier, depending on the zone, the optimal packing plan is actually different. And this is pretty hard for a packer at a pack station to eyeball, if not impossible. So hopefully just talking through some of those issues gave an indication of why our goals should be different. Packing and packaging can be much more dynamic. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of cost and environmental benefit if you can take a data-driven approach to your package, the size of your packaging, the size of your boxes, your corrugated boxes, and your mailers. And of course, the customer experience, much more, less willing to put up with waste than they used to be. So that's kind of the most obvious reason. So that's all I got. Does anybody have any questions? No? No cartonization nerds in here? Okay. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, did a hand go up? Yes, sir. Sure. Sure. You mean algorithmically? Algorithmically? Yeah, sure. So the cubing problem is not specific to parcel. The question was, do you look at other modes? I think this is one of the reasons I love cartonization, because it's all connected. We focus on parcel mostly because that's where the most counterintuitive kind of savings and surprising amount of waste is. But it's all connected and it all bubbles up. And from a certain standpoint, like a cube is a cube. So whether it's a box or a pallet or a container, there was actually a private space company that we worked with recently to do cartonization on their cargo to the International Space Station. So there's almost endless applications for, I'll just say, spatial efficiency, all up and down the supply chain. And I think I can't remember if I said at the top, but on average, parcels are 55% air. They're actually similar stats for ocean container, which is really troubling given how, no offense to any ocean people in the room, but given how polluting ocean is as a mode. So there's a lot of work to be done, for sure. Yeah, cool. Thanks, everybody.